What have you been seeing in the news this week? What's caught your eye? What's been making you scratch your head and wonder what's going on in the world?
It's interesting. We've been talking, since we started this thing about how the double whammy of the trade war and COVID is probably finally going to get people diversifying their supply chain. But yet I haven't seen that much about it in the press. And so, it kind of started last Sunday. Barron's ran a big piece. I don't remember the exact title, but the title was something like "Cost Differences Will Not Impede Diversification of Supply Chain." I'm not sure that's true. I'm not sure what data they had to support that. I mean, maybe around the edges. Bank of America, did a big proprietary survey. Their investment research group, their equity research group, found out that 11 out of 24 of the kind of the S&P sectors have a pretty big move afoot to go geographically diversify their supply chains.
Yeah.
There was an article in Security Magazine, which is it's kind of a cybersecurity and network security type of thing, but it caught my eye because it was talking about how the risks that 1 in 10 companies is affected by some type of cybersecurity issue in their supply chain, whereas 7 out of 10 were impacted by this. And they did a survey of their readership and said that 60% of their readership is actively looking at diversifying supply chain. And then there was a really senior guy at Foxconn this week, which I thought was a stupid thing to say, even if it is true, made the comment that, and you've heard me say that China is the world's factory and it's going to remain the world's factory for a long time. He specifically came out and said, China is no longer the world's factory, right? That's done. That ship has sailed. And that was evidenced in part by the fact that, Foxconn now has close to 30% of its capacity outside of China.
Yeah.
Okay, that still sounds like a pretty
70%
dominant position. I mean, call me when you have any location that is as big as China, right? Then we'll play taps for China. So it's interesting how now a lot of the more mainstream media is getting this. Yeah, this is going to be real, and certainly we're getting more inquiries. People going, where should I go, and how can you help us, and how quickly can you move, and yada yada. So it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, I think it is interesting, and I've seen some of those surveys. I think it was a Gartner survey that said 33% were either moving their supply chain out of China or thinking of moving their supply chain out of China. And for me, that's too broad. I want to know how many are actually doing it, because I suspect out of that 33%, it might be 3%. It's not many that have got to that point yet. And I know people are considering it at board level, and I think with certain supply chains, they're going to be pushed in that direction. That might be medical, it might be pharmaceuticals, it might be certain products, and obviously other sensitive products. But it's $4 trillion worth of manufacturing. You can't just plug it in elsewhere. It's it's substantial. And the more I talk to people that are operating a successful China footprint, the more they tell me China can do things that we can't do elsewhere. We can stand up volume of a new product faster in China. I talked to someone recently about PPE. He was telling me about a company that's making PPE. They're making 10 million units a day. And before COVID, they'd never made a piece of PPE. So that's just awesome capacity generation in next to no time. So I kind of see that, we keep hearing these ideas of this is going to be the new normal. This is what post-COVID is going to look like. But the more I talk to experts, the more they kind of rail against that and say, move out of China cautiously. And also it's a huge consumer market as well. So we have to remember its value there. So
so Lior and I are both, as is, it seems like how Silicon Valley are, Flex alumni from some point in time. Lior was doing some, kind of entrepreneurial activities looking within Flex and figuring out, what were the technologies they were developing that, maybe would be, better and have a brighter future outside. So he started by kind of, liberating some captive technologies and spinning them out. And for the last couple of years, he has been running a venture fund, a very successful venture fund called Eclipse. And again, specifically investing a lot of his money in this, thesis of the reshoring of high-tech manufacturing. So that let's bring on Lior, who I think is in the middle of the night in Tel Aviv.
Yeah, Leo, thanks so much for staying up late and joining us. It's now Friday morning for you as well. It's Friday morning here in Melbourne and Thursday afternoon for Ron in California.
Not very different than my regular nights here with the opposite time zones of California. So don't feel bad.
Yeah, no, I think it's probably pretty much part of your standard day, isn't it? The day seems to have got longer and longer. So did Ron nail it in terms of that thesis of mobility for manufacturing? Tell us a little bit more about what the strategy behind the portfolio is, because you're over 50 companies now, and there's a reason they're all there.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate thanks for having me for this great webinar. And yeah, I think in a high level, Ron nailed it. We are a huge believer of digitizing all the industries, manufacturing, logistics, supply chain, construction, etc. in the very middle of that. And we're basically thinking that all of the technology that is being developed in Silicon Valley in the last 20, 30 years, cloud infrastructures and AI and data science and software and computer vision and automation, is going to migrate from only the IT worlds to industries that have a physical presence, like the manufacturing. And we raised approximately $2 billion now to invest in those type of companies, and we're having a lot of fun. 56 companies in the portfolio. We are 18 full-time people at the firm. A lot of us, as Ron mentioned, came from the manufacturing world. Myself from Flex, Mike, that was the CEO of Flex, Greg was the COO of Tesla, Seth led the Predix at GE, Adam Bryant led production at Tesla. So we feel very comfortable to invest in the manufacturing space. And yeah, we've been seeing, I think pre-COVID, we were seeing fast adoption in the manufacturing world around software and automation and computer vision. And post-COVID is just got 10x. So really excited to see the portfolio growing very fast.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I was interested when we were talking before we came on camera is that you have a lot of collaboration between those companies. So you're able to kind of look for investments to plug gaps, and then you're able to have them help each other out. Tell me a little bit about how that works.
Yeah, when we one of the fun part of investing, we're not a general fund, meaning, we have, 20 investments in the manufacturing world. And what it's allowing you is to do a lot of collaboration between the portfolio. So we can use a technology of a company called Instrumental that's focusing on defects, computer vision, and machine learning into Bright Machines automation cells that are focusing on assembly. And we can take the Bright Machine cells and allow a company of ours in the sortation space called Kindred to leverage some of their technology just in a different industry, in that case in the logistics. And we can have a single call with the CEO of the Gap company and bring in 8, 9 different companies around automation and supply chain and logistics. So it's just a multiplier power. You guys all manufacturing experts, the power of economy of scale, and we are leveraging just from investment point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you look at the investments you've got, which of them are having the most positive demand trends at the moment? Not necessarily by company name, but maybe by technology, or both?
I mean, the reality is we in the last, from COVID, essentially from March, we invested close to $240 million into the portfolio. So we're just seeing an amazing opportunity to companies doubling and tripling their headcount because they're just taking market share. I can tell you that, for example, a company in our portfolio, they're doing predictive maintenance for manufacturing called Augury, will do 500% growth this year. Bright Machines, this year alone will book $50 million in new business. Instrumental tripling this year, Kindred 4x this year, and the list goes on and on. I think what we are seeing is, and maybe I will describe a phone call I had with Kevin Kruntz, the senior vice president of operation at the Gap, that I think demonstrate everything that is happening around. And in his voice, you were telling me, Leo, listen, in regular days before COVID, I could put in this area of the warehouse 200 people. Now I can put 20.
Wow.
I can put though as much robot as I want. And in warehouses that he had in automation, he could sort and deliver to the e-commerce that's growing exponentially fast for the Gap and everyone else. And warehouses that he didn't have automation, he basically had a massive backlog. And we're seeing that in construction, we're seeing that in assembly, we're seeing that in logistics. It's just, and people, if adoption automation wasn't their top 10 things to do, now it's their number 2. When number 1 is their employee health, and their number 2 is like, we need technology right now.
Yeah. So there's that massive acceleration in digital transformation and massive acceleration in demand. You mentioned there, and the Gap is a great example. You mentioned there the disruption of workplace environment and social distancing and all those things. But obviously the other disruptions have been around supply chain, around supply disruption initially, and then demand disruption. Which is driving you the most, or is it kind of all of the above? Is it a desire to automate? Is it a desire to transform, to get that visibility that helps you react when you have a crisis?
Yeah, I think Ron was talking a little bit about that. I'm sitting in the Made in Washington have a task force called Made in USA that I'm sitting there on the board with Subi, and Subi is the SVP operation of Apple. And what he was saying there, he was saying that the board of Apple give him a number 1 priority to move dependency from China for the next 5 years. So they have a 5 years plan for Apple, the largest manufacturing in China, to move dependency of China. And you ask yourself why, and at the end of the day, actually, they're doing a pretty good job of building those phones in the most cost-effective way. And you guys know manufacturing very well, so you know that it's not only the assembly, the supply chain around the components, the know-how, the experience, from CNC to injection molding to PCBA, SMT. Asia today, and particular China, just got a massive expertise leapfrog versus the world. If we like it or not, we lost to China in the last 30 years, the competitive advantage of manufacturing. And it's creating a really big problem, because you have one problem is you cannot hire as before in China. And at Flex, we had a lot of facilities that we had 100% turnover every year. So you need to train people all the time. And wages is going up. And they don't want to do manufacturing anymore. They want to become engineers. And you have supply chain issues because now you're building 3 SKUs a year instead of 1. So you need to do much more EVTs and DVTs and NPIs, and it's just you cannot fast build enough. And then you have geopolitics issue, China, US, and now suddenly you have tariff, and the bomb is going up in 20% because of tariff. And then you have COVID. And I think what everyone is in some place kind of saying, that's enough. We cannot continually running the business in a way that we can go back to the streets and our earning calls and be sure that we can deliver what we are saying without having much more control. And the reality is, in China, you will never will have control, even if you're Apple. And I think this is with a lot of money that is going to come. And I'm telling you, Washington is going to pour trillions of dollars to rebuild the manufacturing and logistics in this country, as similar as China did when you think about it in the last 2-3 decades. So I'm excited because I know that we don't have this amount of people and we don't have the skills. The only way to fill the gap is technology.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And it kind of brings me on to an interesting question. And we've seen lots of talk in the media about government incentives with respect to what Japan have been doing, putting money in to pull supply chains out of China, but also what the presidential candidates are saying in terms of their manufacturing story. Are you concerned about how the way they're spending money, or is the fact that they're talking to people like you, I mean, that would encourage me and make me think, okay, well, maybe there are some incentives to invest in digital technologies, in transformative technologies, rather than just try and throw money at the industry that isn't competitive.
Yeah, so I will say that I will be encouraged when will see the dollar flying. Right now, it's a lot of talks. But I think, joking aside, I think very senior people is being involved from DC, and I think there is when you're thinking about two aspects. Recession, what is the best way to go out of recession is to invest in infrastructure, because that's what will create you the most jobs. And we didn't do it in this country from the 1920. So, if President Trump is going to re-elected again, he is going to put trillions of dollars into the infrastructure, and a lot of that will come to manufacturing. And I believe in that. And I see them acting already. I think the reality is, if you also taking of where the world of consumption is going, personalization, multiple tons of different SKUs, tons of different on-demand stuff, you will need to bring manufacturing much closer to the demand. Because when you're putting the layers of e-commerce on top of that, you just cannot. You are not going to manufacturing for inventory. You're going to manufacturing for demand. And if you are manufacturing for demand, it must be domestic. So when you couple those two things together, I think you're going to have an interesting correlation of growth.
Yeah. I have a comment about that, Lior, and then also a follow-up question. I've heard our president talk a lot about tariffs, talk a lot about being taken advantage of. I heard maybe 2 weeks ago he was kind of invoking the Brazil model, and that's something that's concerning to me. And I think you're on the right points, which is for us to really bring back a lot of manufacturing, we need to think about the infrastructure, the capability, the technology, the capacity types of issues, and simply following the Brazil model, which is, to kind of sum it up, I'm going to make it really expensive for you to import, and therefore you'll build it here. And it's just not that simple, of an equation.
It's not going to. Yeah, and Ron, and it's a great point. We actually talked about it in the last board in April, in the Made in USA. That model can work when your wages is like in Brazil. Yeah. Actually, that model will not work in this country. But the only model that will work in this country is to build the next generation. So you build fully automated lights out factories, and you build automated ASRS warehouses, and you build automated supply chain, and everything is with digital twin and connection between CAD to CAM and all of the good stuff that we have in this country. And I think that should be the focus. And this is where the trillions of dollars needs to be spent, because we don't have suddenly in Nebraska a Zhuhai-like city that you can hire an 80,000 manufacturing employees that's willing to stand for 12, 13 hours a day doing assembly for mobile phone. Just not going to happen.
Yeah. So tell us how Bright Machines plays into that. And since COVID, you were talking about how demand's just going through the roof for a lot of your companies. Mm-hmm. Have you seen a geographic? First off, maybe tell our listeners a little bit about what Bright Machines does. But have you seen that demand shift from where it's coming from, geographically since April, May?
I will tell you, Ron, that by and large, I want to say more than 80% of the total demand across the portfolio is US based. we actually do not see international is moving as aggressively as US right now. And that's encouraging from my point of view, because I think, corporates and Fortune 500s understand that they need to change and giving themselves a chance to adopt to the new world. When their competitors, I believe, is not taking that, not the European and not the Asian right now. Back to what is Bright Machines. So Bright Machines, it's a company we built originally inside Flex, and we built a shell company from Eclipse, and we spun out the team that did automation inside Flex into the NewCo. And today we have around 550 employees worldwide, 3 main geographies here in Israel, San Francisco, Seattle, and we have folks in Guadalajara, China, Europe, etc. And what the company is doing is they're building a software-defined automation. So the grand vision here is, think about, you have a front end of a line that by and large it's fully automated today, all of your SMT and pick and place, etc. And then you have a back end of a line that by and large it's 100% manual today. And we want to do to the back end what's happening today in the front end. So it's a software that's running across different automation cells and allow you to change what the automation sense is building from the software with all of the great tools. So you can, play it and simulate that with digital twin. There is no code on the microfactory. So you actually don't need to, this big controllers program the robots. Everything gets elastic software from remote. And again, the grand vision is that you're sending software from the cloud, and the line is changing what is building, very similar to the SMT. You just, instead of changing the tape with the component, in that case, you will feed the backend with new materials, and that's about it. And yeah, we are seeing we will sign this year around 25 new logos in the United States.
Oh.
And that's, folks like Honeywell and Stanley Black & Decker. So, blue chip customers that understand that automation must be a big portion of where they're investing in their manufacturing world.
Are you seeing more investment from OEM than from EMS in that area?
Much more OEMs. I think there's a lot of pressures on the EMS companies right now. And we're seeing definitely much more adoptions on the OEM side of things. I will say that, Flex is still a very, very large partners of us at Bright Machines, and continue to grow their offering with Bright Machines.
Okay.
And Jabil.
You're going to say something, Ron? And Jabil too.
Oh, no,
okay.
Go ahead.
No, what I was going to say with respect to the EMS companies, I've interviewed a lot of CEOs of EMS companies in the last 3 months, and the topic of digital transformation continuously comes up, and there's a desire to invest, and then there's this background of pressure from their board to keep capex under control. So it's this really, really challenging thing. But what I have seen have some success is some disruptive business models that are much more of that as a service model. And I know within automation, I think that's a really interesting opportunity. Is that something that you're seeing more of?
Yeah, I mean, we, back to Bright Machines and some of the other companies today, we can offer you a CapEx model. We can offer you a pure subscription. So the CapEx is on our books, and you just pay us a monthly subscription, very similar to what you will pay to your labor. We start offering now per unit. So basically, essentially a license. You're building a vacuum cleaner, you pay us, $1, $2 per vacuum cleaner. In the case of Kindred with the Gap, they're paying us 5 cents per item that we are sorting. So all of the software support, hardware, everything is in the company book. They're just paying us, again, very equivalent to what they will pay to a human. In that case, it's a couple of cents per sort. So I believe the EMS companies, it's less about CapEx pressure. It's much more the main issue for EMS public companies in this country right now is they have value-based investors that wants, high EPS, and they don't want you to take the profits and invest in the future. It's just not this type of investors. And to change your investors from value-based to growth phase, it's really hard.
Yeah, yeah. And
You
just to go
mentioned,
back to those, sorry, go
sorry,
ahead,
you
Rob.
mentioned you mentioned Kindred and robots as a service. One of the issues with robotics is you have to support them, right? Not only the maintenance and stuff, but every once in a while they will get lost. They need some human intervention. They need to be rehomed, recalibrated, et cetera. I found it very interesting. I was fortunate enough to get to work with Kindred a little bit last year. Maybe you could talk about the pilot program and how you have people that can remotely operate these robots if they get into trouble.
Yeah, thanks to Ron, we have a great hardware. It's actually not getting stuck very much, but when it is getting stuck in the Kindred, there is a pilot that's sitting far away, actually now sitting in Mexico, believe it or not. And a pilot will sit in front of computer and he will see a fleet of 20, 30 different robots, and he will get an alert when a robot is getting stuck, and he will take from remote a control of the robots and either recalibrate them or do whatever different tasks that he needs to do, and then just press play and the robots will go back to work. And one of the metrics we worked very close with the company when we started Kindred a couple of years ago, we had one pilot on 2 robots, and then we got better and we have one pilot on 6 robots. Now we have one pilot on 20 robots. Soon we'll have one pilot on 50. Because the beauty here is every time that the pilot is doing something manual, the software is recording that and teach the rest of the fleet of what just happened. So it's just getting better by the time, and it's really exciting because I think this is the model in general for future of automation.
Yeah, we're talking about the fact that we've lost a lot of the skills in the U.S. And I wrote an article years ago for Industry Week talking about how we just don't train industrial engineers in this country anymore. We just don't have enough automation engineers. We've lost kind of that core capability, and so it's really interesting that when you're selling it as a service, right? It's not some piece of hardware that install it, you guys have fun with it, and hope it works for you, right? You are providing the assembly service. You are providing the
solution,
order fulfillment, pick and place service, and to do that, given that there is this deficit of skills, you've got this remote way of imparting those skills. I just find that model fascinating.
Yeah, I think well, the other thing I think is really interesting here is you talk about Bright Machines and you talk about Kindred. You've got 2 robotics companies, both doing some really neat stuff, both coming out with disruptive business models. Are you able to leverage the learnings from one with another? Are they collaborating? Are they helping each other to develop the next business model, the next solution?
Yeah, I mean, we just had the team from Kindred helping the teams at Bright Machines to build a business model of each peak payment, and how actually they structure those contracts, how the service is working, how the commitments of UPH or unit per hours is being done. So it's very small things like, hey, can help me with the business model between portfolio up to using Bright Machine Cells to build COVID test for our company called Lucera Health. They're doing an end-to-end COVID test at home that hopefully will be in the market in September. And they need like extremely high volume automated, and they didn't even design the product for a manual assembly. They designed the product with Bright Machines for full automation.
Yeah.
So in short order, there's a lot of collaboration, and we are trying as hard as we can to push more of that collaboration between the portfolio.
Yeah, and it looks to me that what you've identified is a whole group of digital building blocks here. You're investing within those, and you're building a portfolio that's really, really nicely connected and able to help each other. If you look on the software side, what are you seeing in terms of AI development, and what do you think are the big milestones in terms of AI development, particularly for manufacturing and supply chain?
Yeah, it's an area we spend a lot of time to look at, and I cannot tell you So just to give you a sense, we will meet every year 2,700 companies, and we'll invest in six or seven of them. So there's a lot of screening and not a lot of investments, and that's kind of the model. But I cannot tell you the amount of AI companies for manufacturing that we're seeing. Bright people, teams that came. I think the last one I saw, team that came out of LinkedIn, really senior team, and wants to take everything that they learn in LinkedIn and come to the manufacturing, and they're coming and show me this essentially mega connector of data and how they're building these amazing models on top of that to help you with yield. And I'm digging in, I'm asking them, so how are you doing the integration? And he was like, oh, it's not a problem, API. So I was like, what API did you say? I was like, listen, Flex alone, a single company, have like probably 200 versions of their shop floor and probably another 150 version of their BON ERP. There's no APIs there, man. So I think there is still, my point here, there is still a long way, I believe, to see a magic of AI is happening in the manufacturing, because the AI cannot really be useful if you don't have a clean data in real time. And to abstract the clean data from, I'm not talking about small facility or brand new facility, when you will come and work with someone like Dyson, and that having a bunch of their stuff that they run, bunch of their stuff at Benchmark, bunch of their stuff at JBuild, and you tell them, oh, I'm coming with my sexy AI agent, Jim Rohn will laugh on you. Not Jim anymore, but whoever is the new CEO. So, it's a little bit too naive. I think it will happen, but we need to fix the data first.
Yeah. So is there a fundamental problem, Lior, where you're seeing people with huge amounts of AI expertise and not enough manufacturing experience? Is that what it is? They just don't understand how the industry works?
Yeah, I mean, we love to invest in people that have both. So that people that can bring in the technology expertise, but also the subject matter experts. And this is, we've been really successful. I can give one example. We sold an automation company last year to Shopify. Company used to call Six River for $450 million. And those guys came from Kiva, went to Amazon. One of them was on the technical side. One of them was on the business side. They learned everything that they could learn inside Amazon. Then they left to start a collaborative picking robots for e-commerce. And it was very clear that they understand where's the pitfalls, where's there, a rat hole, and how to think about integration, how to think about the system design on the business model. And, in 3 years, with less than $40 million, sold their companies in $450 million. And now building Shopify GFN, the Global Fulfillment Network. So we really like those type of teams that not only coming with great technology backgrounds, but also coming with domain expertise.
Yeah, product knowledge and product experience. Ron, you were going to ask.
Yeah, so a lot of people are, developing side hustles and things they're doing, when they're kind of locked down, and, how are you expanding your mind? I happen to be, taking a course at Berkeley in AI. And, one of the things I'm trying to understand, and maybe you have some insights in this, it seems to me that AI currently, especially as it relates to manufacturing, and if you look at what, Anna's doing in Instrumental, for example, I mean, it's based on having a lot of data, right? And so AI is pretty good about pattern recognition and understanding, hey, I've seen this before, and therefore, at what point in time will we get to some AI for manufacturing where, rather than the ability to very quickly do pattern recognition and learn things, will we ever get to, an inductive reasoning type of AI? So, rather than having a bunch of people that have seen everything in manufacturing, or maybe I haven't seen your new product, but I've launched enough new products that I can kind of look in my own data bank and say, I've seen a problem that kind of looks similar to that before, but it's more of a deductive than a, processing of data. Are we anywhere near something like that for AI in any kind of manufacturing applications?
Hey, Ron, quick question. Are you getting Lior to help you with your homework?
I
um,
refuse to answer that question in case one of my professors is listening.
There
yes,
you go.
I know. I'm happy to provide my feedback, though I didn't finish high school, but I will give it a shot. Um, so I think, Ron, what you're talking about is the two big themes in AI, right? Is what's called supervised learning and unsupervised. And by and large, most of the AI that we are seeing today in real life, it's supervised AI or supervised machine learning. And the concept there, as you mentioned, you aggregate a lot of data and you train. You train the models, you train until you find pattern recognition. It's actually very similar to the human brain. You know, you as a kid, you teach your kid, you know, your kid how to do these things, and then over time you just figure out because you learn with the experience. But intuitively, and that's what unsupervised is like, without ever touch this product, I will immediately know that I need to do this thing. And there is a really big trend right now that's called transferred knowledge. And the concept there is like, can I take what Waymo trained for their self-driving cars and move it to my manufacturing model and be able to find gold without training anything? I just a model that is already been trained on in other adjacent industries that I believe I can transfer to a new industry. The other thing that is really interesting as well is, and that's something actually we're doing with Bright Machines. My vision there was I want to connect the design aspect of manufacturing to the manufacturing. How many times, as a manufacturing expert, some industrial design genius came to you and show you a design and you're like, man, that yield is going to be 2% at best. What are you talking about? I will never be able to put the screw here. But that's kind of the reality, and all of the cycles, and the DFM people don't really like the design people. The design people don't like the manufacturing people. But what I believe the world is going is doing the CAD design. I want that I will have an AI agent that will give me feedback when I'm putting this type of when I'm going to inject model this type of a part, the antenna is actually not going to work well as I want that. So I might need to change the design. And I think that's the holy grail. And actually, I guess we will see it in the next 10 years. This basically unsupervised applications coming to the manufacturing world.
Something like that would speed time to market. I mean, in my career, time to market on new products is just as continue to compress and continue to compress. But that would be a step function. That would be really something that would differentiate the new product cycle for sure.
Yeah, and this is why I hired Amar Shpal to be the CEO of Bright Machines, and you know he didn't come from the manufacturing space. He was the previous Autodesk CEO. Because my vision there is like, I have a lot of flex people that know the manufacturing. I need a team that know the CAD, and if these things will combine together, you have a leapfrog opportunity to make a change. But yeah, I'm super bullish on this area.
Yeah, and is digital twin a key element of that? Do you see,
Also,
and you talk about these data lakes, where do you see the role of digital twin for products, for manufacturing ecosystems, for factories?
I mean, digital twin, it's going to be table stake. We have everything from Vive, they're doing construction, automation, and prefab, that now having a digital twin, so you will be basically able to design the house and figure out all the materials and see how everything is going to react before you actually start building something. Through some of the companies that we already mentioned. But from my point of view, digital twin it's not a question if you need it or not. It's going to be a table stake, and it will allow you to do something I'm excited about, and it's what Ron was talking about is, let's not touch a real hardware before we ran a lot of digital twins and simulations, when we actually know that there is a high chance. It's very similar to what's happening in the semiconductor world. What happened in the semiconductors in the last 20 years with EDA tools should migrate to the manufacturing world.
Yeah.
You're not tape out chips today and getting 3% yield. Just not happening anymore. you are getting out of the first batch usually 90+% yield, even or more. All of you in the call doing a lot of manufacturing, you still have in the EVT and PVT and DVT and even NPI, low or mid double digit, and it shouldn't happen. And I think a digital twin will solve it.
Yeah, and so who do you see as the enablers of the digital twin? Are they software companies? Are they what's our barrier to getting to that digital twin utopia?
There is some big movements there. I mean, you have the CAD people, they're trying to do it. So, everything from Dassault, CATIA, Autodesk, SolidWorks of the world. You have folks that like PTC that coming actually from the PLM world. You have people that coming from the controllers like Rockwell Automations, Siemens, Schneider Electric, etc. So everyone, and naturally you have all of the cloud providers, Amazon and Google and Microsoft, that having today a cloud for manufacturing with some digital twin. So you have everyone understand that it's going to be a holy grail and they want a piece of it.
Yeah. Which of those industries are the leading industries that the electronic manufacturing space should be following? You mentioned semiconductor, but I also look at the automation that's going on in logistics and the millions and millions that are being spent there, and that's obviously a driver as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a huge believer that fast-growing trends usually carrying innovation and technology, and e-commerce it's a great example. It's growing so fast, and it's enforcing the system to change because the system is being built not for e-commerce; it's built for retail. I think what we are seeing now and what we talked before, COVID, trade war, lack of manpower, turnaround of people will push the manufacturing into a similar cycle. And actually, I think it will start in HRS, so our reliability system, automotive, aviation, aerospace, medical, that have the dollars to pay for it because they care about quality and speed much more than consumer electronics. But yeah, it's again, from my point of view, it's not a question if, it's just when.
Yeah, and the sooner the better.
Yeah. So Lior, you spent some time in the EMS business, and now you're in a business that's somewhere around infinitely more profitable. But
infinitely is the right word.
So much of the world's products are built by the large Taiwanese ODMs, the large EMS providers. I think Foxconn's going to do $170 billion this year. That's a pretty good number. If you had to give up this interesting job you have and go be the next CEO of Flex, go be the next CEO of Pegatron, of Foxconn, tell me 2 or 3 things you think you would do differently right out of the chute.
Actually, Mark asked me the same question last week, the CEO of Jabil, so I have it pretty fresh for you. I thought, first of all, my first answer was like, there's no freaking chance I'm giving my job for being a CEO of an ODM.
It's a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical question.
Even in the hypothetical, I'm still scared about the idea. But no, on a serious note, I think you actually need to go. I will answer that as I answer to him is I start with philosophy and then I will go to the tactical. Philosophy, I will go and change the investor base. And I will go and recruit investors that care about growth and not short-term profits, basically value investors. Because if all of my pressure is the next earning calls and what it was my EPS, I have no chance. Yeah. Because on the tactical level, I need to change from a manufacturing company or electronics manufacturing company to a software-defined manufacturing. And that umbrella have automation and AI and digital twin and computer vision. And one of the KPIs I will hold my team is how fast we reduce the manpower without affecting the top line. because that's actually going to determine the efficiency of the organization leveraging technology. And I'm going to approve massive capex budget, not to buy another SMT dumb lines, in order to buy the things that will carry me to the next generation. So I will be extremely aggressive on technology. And I think you also there is a need here to rethink also the geography. I mean, Quanta and Pegatron, and I'm working closely with Benchmark, CEO, and a bunch of companies. So naturally, they from Southeast Asia and Asia. So this is where they build their facilities. But should I build hubs in different countries, lights out, to manufacturing for fast demand? Is additive manufacturing? We didn't talk about it. I'm a huge believer in 3D printing, both for metal and plastics. How I should integrate those into my designs, how I should integrate all of the component vendors. Should they be much more vertically integrated, style Honhai, or should they be much more like a Flex that is basically buying all of the components? So I think it's just you cannot, and this is my current frustration with a lot of those companies. They basically doing exactly what they did in the last 20 years. Okay, let's buy a bunch of new lines. Let's open a new facilities next, not in Zhuhai, in Chongqing. Okay, great. What is the real difference here? And the world changed, and you cannot ignore what's happening in the world.
I think Mondo would take a little bit of exception with that, but I don't disagree. And in fact, a few years ago, I was fortunate enough to guest lecture Hal Lee's class at Stanford on supply chain. And one of the things we talked about in that session was just this, was the capital structure and the ownership structure of the world's largest manufacturers, and how the drive for short-term profits, in my mind, kind of suppresses manufacturing innovation. I'm old enough to have grown up in captive factories where we built our own stuff, and we actually did R&D around process. And we did that because if we could differentiate our process, it would kind of separate us from our competitors. But now today, in an outsourced world, if Mondo and his guys come up with a new process, isn't it kind of widely available to everybody? And so, given your concerns and you're adamant that you're not going to go back in that space, can we ever really go to the next level of innovation for manufacturing the way manufacturing is globally structured today? So
I will ask your questions in a slightly different way. I have two options, and you put me in that seat and you tell me you can pick only one option. You can pick SpaceX model, or you can pick Jabil and Flex model, and I will always pick the SpaceX model. Because I believe that this is the future of manufacturing, this vertically integrated, cutting edge, automated, additive manufacturing, software-led, high caliber people. I think this world of how EMS is being structured, that by large, it's a labor arbitrage game, but it's not there anymore, but that's kind of was the model, it's gone. And you should not try to real life that with throwing in that innovation, because the structure is the wrong structure. So I will just go and rebuild it from scratch, and there is no CEOs that have the guts in the EMS and ODM worlds to say, hey, I'm CC from Quanta, and I'm going now to basically change the full structure of the company. They're going to do their 5, 6, 7, 8 years, make a lot of money, a couple of millions of dollars a year, and go home. It's going to be someone else's problem.
It's hard to make yourself obsolete.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just a lot of tweaking, isn't it? Do you think the issue is that we had the search to be the world's largest EMS, we had the search to be the world's cheapest EMS, those are kind of ships have sailed. Is what's important now, someone's got to be the world's smartest EMS? Is that what the next drive should be?
Yeah, no, I like the way you put it, and when Mark asked me, so what is your strategy in Eclipse? I told him, man, I'm building a hybrid EMS. I have basically a bunch of companies that if you will put them together, I will get the EMS just in, 0.001% of your total employees. And by the way, I'm going to do a better throughput than you and a better yield. So, naturally, this is hypothesis. It's not necessarily what we are going to do, but the concept is like, you want the future of EMS, you need to go build it from scratch, and it must be smart.
Yeah, and you've got to be super creative. And you mentioned additive, and interestingly, in the additive space, there are a bunch of companies that have created those manufacturing ecosystems that refer to themselves sometimes as manufacturing as a service, or global manufacturing ecosystems, where they have a connected supplier base. They have some boots on the ground around those. They have, maybe some DFM on the fly on their system and some AI supporting those. Do you see those as an exciting part of the future of the manufacturing space?
Yeah, I'm a huge believer of on demand. And again, all of those people are riding on the same waves. They are leveraging digital twin and CAD to manufacturing and all of the good stuff. I will tell you that the printers themselves and the materials are getting into a place, and the speed that this can replace traditional CNC, and that it can replace injection molding. Not for consumer, by the way. It's not there yet. But I will give you a stat. SpaceX in 2014 had 3% of the total BOM in additive. SpaceX in 2020 going to have 24%.
Wow. Yeah.
That's
significant.
That's a lot of less CNC machine and stamping, and before it's much more big 3D printing, crapping parts. And if I will check the same stat of how many, what was the percentage of parts in the machining team in Flex or JBill is being printed in 2020, my guess it's less than 1%.
Yeah, we really haven't seen the metal 3D printing take off very much in the EMS space, in the contract manufacturing space. A lot of plastics, not a lot of plastics, but certainly not in the metal. The sintering stuff just hasn't taken off.
But there's some amazing stuff out there. You look at what Mark Forged and people like that are doing, some fantastic technology.
Yeah, we have a company in this space called Vulcan out of Boston, and basically they're going to compete with CPC, with casting precision of Berkshire Hathaway, that doing 34 that got bought in $34 billion, and the only thing that they have is 25,000 people doing CNC for aerospace defense and medical device, and we're going to eat the dog food.
Yeah,
because we can print way faster than a human, and it's going to be much more accurate. And by the way, on a single machine of Vulcan, you can do $20 million of parts a year. So it's just the unit economics is there, like big time. It's going to happen.
Yeah. And when you look at these young startups that you're talking to, this 2,700 a year or whatever that come through your door, when they look at manufacturing, are they starting to look at it differently? Are they looking for more digitally enabled manufacturers? Are they thinking maybe they'll do their own captive manufacturing? Maybe they'll use, these manufacturing as a service models? Has that changed?
Yeah. I think, I would say we started the film 5 years ago. I will tell you that today I see much more courage in those entrepreneurs' eyes, and they're coming. If they used to be scared by the traditional EMS and CMs and ODMs, and say, "Oh, I'm just going to be a small little niche solution and work with them," now we hear much more voices of like, "We actually don't need them, and we're going to replace them if needed. We're going to be much more vertically integrated, and we have much more." We know that technology is the real differentiator and not what they have. So that carriage is telling me that, some big change is coming.
Yeah, that's a big change in trend. One of the trends that I think is really interesting that you seem to be highlighting is that there's no slow up in terms of technology investment. The whole COVID thing seems to have made you more aggressive rather than defensive.
Yeah, did not change a thing. from pace or deployment, at least from our point of view, and at least from what I'm talking with my other friends that investing in similar industries. So yeah, no slowdown, at least not yet.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? And it's one of the things that we've been trying to figure out is what are the problems coming out of COVID? What do we need to solve? It seems that capital isn't one of them. Obviously, the other ones we talked about are automation, but also this massive shift in supply chain footprint. Do you see that shift as realistic, or do you think it's a lot slower than people expect?
I mean, I think I don't think we had any better catalyst in the last 50, 60 years. So if that one will not make a big change, I think nothing will make a big change.
Yeah, I agree with that.
When you think about the concept of like, there is a distant advantage of having a lot of people in the same facility with COVID. You couldn't think about something that would be more dangerous on the current, mass production solutions in Asia. That's what they built on, right? Massive facilities with a lot of people. So if we will not be able to use that as a catalyst to really step on the gas and kind of making the changes in this country to trying to leapfrog and rebuild a lot of the manufacturing, I think nothing else will help us. I said in April, I said, listen, anyone that knows something about manufacturing will tell you it's freaking stupid to give a car manufacturing the job of building ventilators. It's just stupid. Yeah. But that's the reality. We don't have anything else in this country to build ventilators, and we needed a lot of them. And China could build 1 million ventilators in 48 hours, and they built a hospital in 3 days because they have a prefab. Yeah. And we need to wake up.
Yeah. So I guess the answer then, when you look at the changes to the way manufacturing footprints exist, the answer isn't to shift it out of China or to shift it anywhere specific. Is to have more agility, more visibility, and that digital twin. So when you do want to make a shift or you do want to respond to a disruption, it's there. Is that all about having the right supply chain visibility tools?
I don't think so. I think supply chain visibility, it's one of them. The reality is we can try to bring assembly back to this country. To bring the long tail supply chain, it's a different ballgame that will take 100 years. And I think we need to have a good strategy for it. It's above my pay grade, so I couldn't come up with an idea. But I think at least let's focus on where we have an unfair advantage, and it's in the technology side of things, in manufacturing, and not in scale or machinery people, or go trying to find someone in Midwest that understand how to tune the right chemicals in an SMT machine. It's jobs that we don't have in this country anymore.
Yeah. So it's the skill set as well as the as well as the tools there. We've only got a couple of minutes left, guys. I just wanted to wrap up and figure out what today's key takeaways are. Ron, I'm going to let you have a little stab at some takeaways for today for our audience before we finish.
Yeah, I think so many of the problems that we've been talking about, especially you and I, Phil, on the series, so many of them are about how do we adjust the system that exists today to respond to, both the tariffs and the pandemic, and like Lior said, if these aren't catalysts, what the hell is a catalyst? Having said that, we've spent an awful lot of time talking about, how do we steer the particular ship that is, the electronics manufacturing world today. And what I'm hearing from Lior is, that ship's got an awful lot of momentum, and pretty soon somebody's going to build a little ship from scratch. It's just going to go blowing right past it. And so really interesting perspective to talk to someone who, rather than being in the manufacturing, is spending all of their time trying to disrupt what we do. So I found this just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, likewise. And, my favorite word there is disruption, and I think the industry desperately needs some disruption. It looks like, Lior, a lot of your investments are disruptors. Is that something that is coincidental or deliberate?
Oh, it's definitely deliberate.
You like to shake things up.
I mean, I think what you cannot take is, it's a $3 trillion industry multiple, right? Only I think metal is like 2 trillion or something like that. And it's just so big. And I want to take a lot of it. And, and I think the good news for me is my incumbents are analog players and not digital. And I'm coming with only digital.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's clear that the digital will eat the analog as we move into the next decade. Fantastic. Lior, thank you so much for your time. Ron, thanks for joining me again. You're absolutely right. This has been a very different conversation to the other ones we've had, but equally valuable and absolutely fascinating. Thanks again for your time, everybody, and thank you to our audience for dialing in. Lior, thanks for staying up so late. Go get some sleep, or maybe you've got some more work to do. I don't know.
Still have like 200. I still have 200 emails to take care of. Thanks so much for having me, guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.